Hey Fanatics, I'm Dylan Phillips, and here's the Film Fanatics review of Nocturnal Animals. As always, we're going to start off with the spoiler-free likes and dislikes, then we're going to move on to the spoiler-heavy thoughts of this film, and then finish off with my final words. Nocturnal Animals is the second film by fashion designer turned director Tom Ford. Starring Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal, the film follows the story of Susan, an art exhibitor who believes she has the perfect, lavish lifestyle, until her ex-husband Edward sends her the manuscript for his new novel, Nocturnal Animals. As she reads the novel, Susan begins to realize the cracks in her life as the characters on the page hit a little too close to home. The likes. First of all, the acting was phenomenal. Jake Gyllenhaal continues to impress with another great performance. Aaron Taylor Johnson surprised me with his, but it was Michael Shannon who took the spotlight of this film. The cinematography is stunning, showing Tom Ford's great eye for detail. The musical score was reminiscent of classic films. It blended the style of Bond orchestrals with the likes of Citizen Kane, bringing about the feel of a very dramatic thriller. The most surprising thing to me was how seamlessly intertwined the storyline was in this film. Most of the time when you see multiple storylines, they tend to feel a little bit forced or cliched when they jump back and forth, but Nocturnal Animals blends them nicely. The dislikes. Now there isn't much to dislike about this film if you know what it is going into it, and that is a dramatic thriller. Think of it in the vein of The Girl on the Train, Gone Girl, Prisoners, or Enemy, because this movie is not for a fast-paced audience. This film is definitely not for people that hate unanswered endings. I won't spoil it for you, but the ending of this film is ambiguous. That and the fact that the opening scene is a little bit too risque might put some people off, but I promise that it does get better. My biggest problem with this film is that although it's beautifully intertwined, one of the stories definitely outshines the other. And that's where I'll end my spoiler-free thoughts on this film. If you want to see my final word, or the rating that I give this film, pause and click the link in the description below, because now it's spoiler time. Firstly, I have to go back and talk about the storytelling of this film because it had both good parts and bad. Tom Ford was able to incorporate both storylines seamlessly, while adding a third flashback storyline showing the faltering marriage of Susan and Edward. The exposition between these three storylines didn't seem random or forced in the grand scheme of the story. However, the story of Susan's life is overshadowed by Edward's novel. In the novel, you have a man who loses his family to a bunch of murdering carjackers, and so he seeks revenge with the help of a no-nonsense, nothing-to-lose cop, and this goes up against the story of a woman who's reading a book and contemplating her life. Now yes, I understand her life is changing as she slowly reads the book, but watching Amy Adams lay in a tub or drink wine by a fire is definitely not as thrilling. You can only watch someone throw a manuscript to the floor and pick it back up so many times. It wasn't the story itself that made the novel more fascinating than real life, but the characters within it. In Susan's story, she was the sole character, with others taking a back seat, whereas in Tony's story, you have a clearly defined hero, a villain, and a mentor. You have Tony going up against the sinister Ray, all while being helped by his cop friend Bobby. That isn't to say that Susan doesn't go through a transformation of her own. As she reads the novel, she slowly starts to fall back into love with Edward, and she starts to realize that her life may not be as meaningful as she thought it was. But it's too late. And that's why I believe that this story is a little underwhelming in comparison to the other. Side note, I would totally watch an entire film based on the Tony storyline. It was the perfect dramatic revenge thriller with a splash of the Coen brothers. On to the most perplexing parts of this film, the beginning and the end. So I understand that the obese women were used as an art exhibit to show Susan's profession and as a personification of the world's image of America as a whole. I just feel like they kind of threw that in our faces immediately without warning, so it was a little more shock than anything. As for the end, it can be a bit confusing, so I'm going to try and explain it as best I can. Basically, Susan reads the novel and falls back in love with Edward and decides to meet him for dinner, but in the end, she gets stood up. Now what does this mean? Well, for the entire film, we saw everything through Susan's eyes. Even when she was reading the novel, it was how she perceived it. So when she reads For Susan at the beginning, she instantly assumes her romantic ex-husband wrote a novel pertaining to her and their relationship, rather than himself for a change. But that isn't the case. Susan assumes that Edward wrote himself as Tony, while Laura and India are herself and their unborn aborted child. That's Susan's subjective perspective. Now, what if Edward did write Susan into his novel, but not as the romantic interest, and instead the villain? Yes, that could be a jump, but bear with me. Imagine, Edward is still Tony, but instead Susan is Ray, and the family is his passion for writing. When we first meet the Hastings, they are driving in the middle of nowhere, unsure of where the road will take them, just like Edward feels with his writing. Susan comes into the equation and ends up murdering this passion by saying he cannot succeed at it. This pushes Edward on a vengeance quest to try and overcome what his villain has done to him. With the help of his pent-up emotion and creativity, he has nothing to lose but to confront this problem, and with years and years of trying, he is finally able to succeed, just like how Tony was able to find the men who killed his family after years of searching. What Susan believed was a crazed, hopelessly in love gesture by her ex-husband was actually a final thank you and final screw you, showing that he could succeed despite what she said. It's also interesting to note that the final shot of this film is set on Susan's eyes, a feature that Edward said that both she and her mother have in common, showing her true sadness for her life. And with the thoughts heard, here's my final word. Nocturnal Animals is a gritty, dramatic thriller while attempting to show the psychological turmoil of a woman in crisis. Tom Ford is able to bring his eye for detail to this story with beautiful cinematography, set design, and prop imagery. Although the storylines work together, one outshines the other, making you question the true protagonist of this film. With a superb cast, Nocturnal Animals is worth the watch. Tons to digest, but I loved it. I give Nocturnal Animals 4 out of 5 stars, and I recommend this film to anyone who's a fan of dramatic thrillers like Gone Girl or most of Jake Gyllenhaal's recent work. With award season coming up, I could see this film being nominated for a couple of categories, including director, screenplay, score, and cinematography, but I expect it to win Best Supporting Actor for Michael Shannon. Definitely the best character in that category for 2016 so far. Thanks everyone for watching my review. Are you planning to see Nocturnal Animals? Or if you've already seen it, do you have something to add? How do you think this movie compares to others in its genre? And what did you think of the ending? Let me know in the comments below. This has been Film Fanatic Reviews. If you like this video and you want to see more, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Check out our latest Fanatic 5 video, where we discuss the best Disney sidekicks. Don't forget to follow us on our social media. We post new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, Fanatics, keep it real.